Recording has commenced. Thank you. Well, again, good morning. Welcome to all of council, our CAO, municipal administrators, any members of the public who might be watching live or might tune in later. Might tune in later on our YouTube stream. I will call to order this special meeting of Council of the Municipality of Jasper. This special meeting was called pursuant to the provisions of Section 194 sub 3 of the Municipal Government Act, and I'm so happy to note for the record that this meeting is called at the request of all members of council, so that we can have a special meeting at the time at which we would otherwise have had this morning at committee of the whole meeting. That puts us into a position where we can deal with some items on an expedited basis as necessary and make decisions in this special meeting format. I would ask first for an approval of the agenda from any councillor, and recognizing that under the rules of special meetings, if there are to be changes to the agenda with all of council present, we can make that, but it would have to be unanimous given the rules surrounding special meetings. So with that in mind, is there a councillor prepared to make a motion to approve? I see two hands up. I'm going to go furthest east. Kathleen, thank you for that motion. All those in favor, please just raise your hands. I cannot see Councillor Melnick, but if you can just confirm if you have audio, Councillor Melnick. Oh, the hand is up. Thank you very much. All right. There are none opposed. That motion is carried. That takes us to our agenda item 3, new business. We were to receive an update from incident management team. As the first item, I think that CAO Given, I see one of the incident commanders there as well now, but I will turn it to Mr. Given to lead us into this agenda item.
Sure. Thanks very much, Your Worship. Appreciate that, and appreciate the fact that John is here. We have Christine's name down. She's been acting as incident commander for the municipality of Jasper. I'm going to speak a little bit about the governance structure and how incidents are handled, but maybe I know John and Incident Command and Unified Command have a pretty busy day. I thought maybe John could give us a little bit of an operational update, an overview before I get into the presentation around the structure of Incident Command and how that works. So John, maybe I'll throw it over to you again, recognizing that the team is very busy.
I appreciate that, and I'll just do the usual. Can you hear me on the audio check? Perfect. Okay, good morning, everyone. Pleased to present a bit of an update here. I don't have any maps or anything we're ready to show you, but you're likely familiar with the fire area and the park itself. So the fire remains classified as out of control, sitting at around 33,000 hectares. If you've seen the fire progression maps or any of the updates that have been released in the last, since it really started, it hasn't grown all that much since the initial run on the first day and a few subsequent runs up the Moline Valley for the first week. We've really focused our suppression on the northwest perimeter, and it's this line from, we're basically calling it river to rock. That's the line that poses the greatest risk to the town site itself. That line, as of this morning, is sitting at about 98% contained or controlled. And in one of our plan section chief's words, words matter. So contained means that the fire is unlikely to spread under current and expected conditions and resourcing. That just means that the weather we've got and we're expecting and the crews that we have on the line, it's not likely to spread beyond that. And so I think that line was sitting, and I looked at about 60 or 59% contained. Then the controlled portion is unlikely to spread or not likely to spread. That's pretty much when we walk away, we start pulling crews off of it, demobbing gear, and we'll start scanning it with infrared scanning. We've been doing that all along, just to confirm that there's no hot spots left on it, but we're confident that that line is secure. So we're aiming towards 100% containment status by tomorrow, and that's one of the criteria we had for re-entry of the town site. So we're confident we'll meet that objective. We're starting to spread out into other priorities areas of the park. And so the other areas that the fire is quite active has been the Moline Valley. If anybody's been in and out of town or seen photos from town in the last few days, there's a portion just above the Overlander, the entrance to the Overlander, and up the Moline Valley that there's a lot of unburnt fuel there. And so yesterday afternoon, about 3 o'clock, and the afternoon before, it's been quite active in there. And we're not worried about it. It's got fire on the other side, and we did some ignition on the airstrip 2 days ago to reduce that spread potential. So the fire would not be able to get down, spot across the river, and go around or outflank our northwest perimeter line. One of the messages that we've been putting forth and that we continue to put forth is that as people move into town and start to re-enter, they may see there still will be smoke around. There still will be parts of the fire that are active, and they might see smoky conditions. And we just want people to be aware of that. Yesterday, I was in town with the mayor and some of the media, and they could see that column coming up quite actively. But we're just trying to stress that it's not an area we're concerned about. We have plans in place to do some ignition, some holding lines, and a few lines down that valley on sort of up to the Morrow slab. So all that area above the Overlander Trail. Further down the Moline Valley, the fire's been relatively quiet on the, I guess we'll say the west side of the road. And then on the east side, we've got some plans in place. So we might start doing some ignition there. But we're not too concerned about it moving up the valley because it's got the Excelsior fire to bump into. There's some rock free Medicine Lake where it has been hot. We've got crews working in that area, so we're feeling pretty good about that one. And the latest area that we've been actioning is the south end towards the Whirlpool drainage and the 93 South. I'm from LOYK. We always call it the 93 North there. So the south end of the fire there, we've got it capped off on the east side of the 93 and tied into the rocks, and the crews put a controlled status on that line yesterday. There's a crew from Nova Scotia who's very excited and happy. They're doing phenomenal work, as maybe it's their first time out here in the mountains. On the west side, around the Caribou Recovery Facility, forgive me if I'm using the wrong terminology, and up into the Whirlpool, we've been looking at options to keep it out of that drainage. And there hasn't been a lot of good natural features that we can use. And so we were starting to think about some options for indirect further down the valley, but the weather's been really cooperating. We took more rain on the fire across all areas last night. Not a ton of rain, not enough to put it out, but enough to make it safe for our ground crews to get in there and action it. So they reopened one of the roads, I forget the name of the road there, yesterday to allow crews to get access to the perimeter of the fire. The crews are going in there today. We've got 2 unit crews, and I think we're putting a third one down tomorrow. So those are the big areas of concern. The Marmot Basin area crews have been working in that. It's either contained or controlled, and we've actually been moving resources out, and we've been scanning that line daily, or between the northwest perimeter line and that part around Marmot. They've been getting a lot of attention, a lot of scans, and there's no heat shown as of last night's scan. So we're feeling really good that this fire is hemmed in by the rocks on the east side of the 93 highway corridor, and on the west side, and then those drainages that it could get down and it could sneak around us. We've had crews in there, and so there's a lot of work left to do. That Whirlpool drainage, we're talking weeks of crews of suppression in there. As we move forward into a reentry phase, the IMT is going to look at relocating our incident command post closer to, or at least some part of our incident command post, into town, and we don't know what that'll look like yet. But basically, our crews are driving 2 hours a day each way, and that just decreases the efficiencies. So we'll be looking at staging some crews closer to the fire as things become available, because we're starting to tackle those outlying areas as we move away from the areas of concern around town. So that's about it for a fire update, but I'm happy to answer any questions if people would have them.
Thank you, Jonathan. I do see some hands up. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, great update. I really like the fact that you're using all the features that or locations, and explain this exactly where the fire is moving and has moved. And thank you for all of the work that you and your team are doing. Honestly, I'm going to ask a question that probably won't be able to be answered today, but we've always been afraid of a fire from the west. I don't think there's been any backburning towards the down the West Valley. Is there conversation about, with all the crews in town, doing some type of protection there before pulling everybody up?
Great question. And we did have some conversations about that. Earlier on, we were, when we had the high volume sprinkler lines around town, and we really did weigh the pros and cons of starting some ignition in that. We were worried about we didn't have quite enough resources at first. And then, as I mentioned, that weather hasn't been very conducive to ignition. We're getting enough rain to make it hard to get some of the ignition plans done. So some of those larger ignition pieces, we've been chatting about one on the tramway for the last few days, and then one on sort of that Moline Valley. But there has been enough rain to put it out, but there's just enough rain to make it hard to do ignition. It's just enough little bits of moisture, and I think our window for that is passed. So you're right about, the threat to fire remains from the west. I don't see it from this fire, but from future fires. But knowing of a lot of the prep work that town has done on Fire Smart and some of the treatments they've done there, I feel like the west is very well protected. Not that the south wasn't, but when I've always considered Jasper, I've been up here a number of times, those areas around the west and those fuel treatments, that was one of the most proactive fuel treatments I've seen in parks for sure, and in cities I've worked in or towns I've worked in the urban interface. And I've got a background in urban interface fire. So anecdotally, when the fire did reach, and even though it went for a large run on the day of 25th, 26th, I guess would have been, or maybe earlier, the fuel treatment areas did work really well. Like we had some Canadian Forest Service people out here that were able to show that. And I think Mayor actually referenced when we got into town, some of those treatment areas around town, the Crown Fire didn't hit town, it dropped down into a surface fire. And that's what we were able to control with sprinklers and such. So there's ways of reducing the fire, and I feel like town's in pretty good shape. We're just not at a point where we want to go in and reintroduce a large scale fire. The way I look at it is this fire has been so quiet, I'm hesitant to bring it back to life. We also have done a lot of dozer guards. So there's a couple in the north that have been done, and we're talking about refreshing some other ones and some of those lines. So we'll leave the town in a well-protected space.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Thank you, Jonathan. Any other questions for Jonathan at this time? Councillor Demota, go ahead.
Thank you, and I appreciate as well, John, all the work that the crews are doing around the community and in the park. We feel safer when we see you, and I'm grateful to have all those dedicated people on the ground and behind the scenes. There's not enough said about the people behind the scenes, and I know that you all go through lack of sleep at times as well, so we can share a little bit of that with you. So some of the questions I think I have, you talked about some dosing being done on the north side, and I think there's still some genuine concern about unburned fuel on the bench area, Pyramid Bench, Bear Hill. Having still some beetle infected trees in the area. And then just, is there more work being done on the fire break and consideration of expanding that around the community that hasn't been burned yet? Because I think some of the concern is future evacuations again, if that isn't dealt with properly.
Sure, that's a great question. And, it's a little bit outside of the scope of what the team is dealing with now, because we're more into that re-entry and the suppression or the control and management of this fire. But I know from just my day job as a fire management officer in Kootenay, working with the park here, that they have been working, there's long range plans. They're working on a long-term fire management plan that will address some of those concerns. So many years ago, I came up as a short-term assignment here when Dave Smith was still around, and we were looking at, this was before the harvesting operation up there, had looked at some prescribed burns, and I know those plans are still on the books, but they've probably being retweaked now with the new guards and the new breaks that are in there. I think there's just going to be a lot more work and a lot more discussions of how do we, what do we do next? So it's definitely not a immediate thing. There's going to be some plans and some things put into place, but it's definitely not something that's done. And we're seeing this with a lot of our communities, and the communities in my own field unit. What can we do now, and what can we do long term? And those plans are just, it's not, unfortunately, it's not a once and done sort of thing. So those fuel treatments that were put in a few years ago on the bench and west of there, they need to do some continuous maintenance on those, make sure they're continuing to clear them. And anecdotally, I know that those conversations are happening. This is definitely going to bring them to the surface. So I don't know what the answer will be there, but I'm sure the field leader, I know that they will be talking about that once we get back into the reentry and conform on the recovery phase.
Thank you, Councillor DeBoda, and thank you again, Jonathan. Other questions for Jonathan, recognizing that he is probably anxious to be released to his real duties, but he's here with us now and can answer questions if there are more. Councillor DeMota, your hand again.
Yeah, thank you. Just one more, like when we've heard a little bit about areas directly outside of the community. There have been some questions on the Lake Edith area, just because Jasper Park Lodge was talked about, and just the what if you could repeat in that specific area there, if there's been any affected areas or some there's a continuous fire there, or whatever, an update. Sorry.
Sure. No, great question. That area is actually, I believe last night at our ops debrief, they were putting a green line around that, which is our controlled, not likely to spread, unlikely to spread, and they've started pulling the gear out of there. So the Jasper Park Lodge sprinkler system, sprinkler protection, will be coming down over the coming days. I think they broke the lines and started draining the water from the hoses to dry them out. They're rolling those up today. So we're feeling confident that there's no threat to fire to those areas anymore. The reopening of those will be a longer term, especially the Lake Annette and Edith areas, will be a longer term conversation as we, we'll look at risks, whatnot. But from a fire perspective, there's the fire essentially is out over there.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, one last question. It's just about re-entry and what will be able to be accessed. A lot of active people in our community, and are we going to be confined to the town site for quite a while, or will there be some perimeter trails and areas opened up, such as around the lakes or up on the bench? How long do we foresee that being closed?
That's a really good question. And actually, I was just having some conversation this morning about what can we reopen and what can we reassess. And so, speaking from personal experience, I went through the Keenau fires in Waterton, and there's a lot of conversations between the park afterwards about how do we safely reopen trails. And there's been some really good lessons learned, because there was some doom and gloom about these trails. There's a lot of dead trees. There's a lot of hazards to visitors, and how do we keep these trails maintained and cleaned? The short answer is it wasn't as bad as we thought it was going to be. And so I just want to offer that as a glimmer of hope that the trails are going to look different, but they're going to come back pretty quickly. And we were able to go in, and we talk about level of disturbance when we talk about our danger tree assessments. And basically, anytime you go in the forest, there's a risk that trees could come down. But what we do is we assess places like maybe a viewpoint or a sign where people might stop to spend a bit more time. And we do a little bit more of a thorough assessment there. Maybe we take out a few trees that we wouldn't. We cut down a few trees, that we wouldn't. And so those assessments are ongoing for the fire affected areas. One of the things that I started the discussion, well, what about the non-fire affected areas or non-severely affected fire areas? So I'm envisioning the bench or the trails west there that have not been drastically affected. And I think I can't promise anything now, but it's on our list to bring to the park and say, from our perspective, we see a minimal risk or a manageable risk, understanding that I would love to get out for a run on those trails before I take off and finish my shift here. I'm hoping that we can find a way to reopen those and at least give people some sense of returning of what it looks like to return to the new normal and get them out on the landscape. So I could see those trails being open sooner. And the trails around the lake are a little bit harder just because of the intense fire that did go through that area. But we recognize that as coming up as the next step, and it's going to come up quickly. So I hope to have more information for you in the coming days.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you for that, Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I just wanted to thank you for the recent commentary on the trails and so on, that and ties into my comment about how appreciative I think the community is of getting the daily updates and the ability for us to get them posted and have them available so that people can follow the progress and where we are. And it's somewhat assuring to see the progress towards containment and, you know, eventually now hopefully to 100%. And I think if that can continue well into September with continued updates, as long as the incident command is available, I think people who are residents who are returning would appreciate that level of comfort with what's being done in and around the park.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense, and we're happy to provide them. Information is key now, and we have a very robust information section working on the team, made up of a mix of Jasper, Municipality of Jasper staff and ours, and it's going very well.
Thank you again. Any further questions? I just wanted to, again, thank you, Jonathan, for taking time out. And you mentioned the phrase that is circulating now, of course, from our own communications department, advising residents as they begin to re-enter to be prepared for a new normal. Part of that new normal includes fire on the landscape, as Jonathan has indicated. He indicated that he and I accompanied media and Minister McIver to town yesterday. We stopped near the site of the Anglican and United Churches, formerly so, to allow some footage for the media crew. And while we were there, the smoke plume from the burn just north of the Parks Canada Moline Range grew considerably. And I can tell you that the minister, unfamiliar with the environment, his first question was, how close is that? Residents, as they return, will have to get used to the fact that there is still fire on the landscape and there will be restrictions. And it's comforting to hear, Jonathan, that potentially access to trails might be more attainable than we might otherwise have thought. But as you speak to residents who are returning, please do remind them that the new normal includes all sorts of limitations in the surrounding environment. But the town itself, Incident Command confirms, is safe to allow the return of visitors, but that does not go for the entire park. So part of our messaging and our requirement as elected people to make sure that residents understand that the new normal is quite a bit different than the old normal. Thank you again, Jonathan. Appreciate the time you've devoted to this all the way through and your continuing time today.
Okay, and I just would like to take a moment to thank everybody and the municipality for allowing. I know some of your staff, and I don't know how you're structured, but I've worked in Unified Command for a number of times now, and I've been through a few of these wildland urban interface incidents. It's going extremely well and will be a benchmark that is used going forward. And a lot of that is the support that we've gotten from the town council, from all of our partners and our stakeholders. It's just been refreshing to see, because I've also seen it not go well. And so it's been refreshing to come in here and just have that support, and everybody's working together and we're working through the processes. It says a lot for the investment that the town made in training and getting people up to speed and working with each other. So as somebody that's coming in from a different park, and my team's made up from people across the country, we've been able to just step right in and get to work. So I thank everybody for that. I am going to run off to another meeting now. So I wish you the best for the day, and I'm sure we'll chat more in the coming days. Thank you.
Your Worship, if I may, we'll just I have
Experiencing technical difficulties. My apologies.
no problem. Council John, was there. I think we referenced him as incident commander. And he used a lot of terms that, you know, the public have been hearing a lot over the last while. Council is likely familiar with all these things from when we passed our emergency management bylaw. But I thought it might be useful as we, you know, resume regular council governance to go through some of these terms, what they mean, as well as, you know, how our regular governance system and directing the work of the municipality differs when we're under incident command and under the state of local emergency. So I have a short presentation to guide people through the basics of that. And I will go and share my screen, and I'll have to apologize for the rudimentary nature. I'll just make sure that everybody can see that with a head nod. You can see that there's some words, big white page on your screen and some words. Great. So as I mentioned, you know, we've heard from Christine and John, and in the past, Landon, who many of us are familiar with, as incident commanders. And our typical service delivery setup for the municipality and for Jasper National Park is generally like this. And again, this is maybe oversimplified, but in the case of the municipality, we have municipal council who provide direction to the chief administrative officer, administration, and then you know, that filters down to the staff who go and deliver frontline services. Roughly speaking, and I created this on my own, so I don't know if Superintendent Allen would, you know, revise it, but I think generally it's the same, that the superintendent gives direction to Jasper National Park administration staff, and they go and deliver regular services. So, you know, there's that layer that provides direction, and then the body that actions that direction. In the case of an incident in Jasper National Park, there's, you know, something happening in the park that needs a response. They would set up an incident management team, that's IMT, and they would, under that structure, delegate some authority to an incident commander. And that incident then can be actioned by this subset of the Jasper National Park administration. And you can see that the superintendent is still the quote unquote boss of the administration, but the incident commander is directing the activities in response to the incident, whatever that incident might be. So it isn't the entire administration staff, it is a sort of a subset, and there's an incident commander that is providing direction to the IMT, the incident management team. The municipality, if there was an incident inside our jurisdiction, which extends only within the town site, we would also set up an incident management team, led in our case by a DEM, which is the Director of Emergency Management, who acts as our incident commander within emergencies within the town site. Under our bylaw, and you'll see this on screen, under the Municipality of Jasper's Emergency Management Bylaw, the Director of Emergency Management is established by council, and that position is specifically identified as having responsibility to act as the director of the ECC or the incident commander, and to coordinate all emergency operations within the municipality. So that is the legal structure that authorizes the incident command structure within our, you know, adjacent to our municipal operations. So I'll drop the DEM and we'll just proceed with that sort of balance of incident commander terminology. There is a difference between the municipality and Parks Canada. Obviously, that incident command system still goes and actions the incident. But in our case, we also have a subset of council that is established under our emergency management bylaw to sit as the emergency advisory committee. So the mayor and 2 members of council are appointed annually to the emergency advisory committee. That advisory committee provides advice to municipal administration on planning and training, and in an incident, they can provide advice. They're an opportunity for that incident commander to check back in, but not to direct the work. And that's why you see that box represented there as a dash box, because they're there as a check-in, but they're not there to direct the work. That ability to direct the work of the IMT continues to lie with the incident commander. So that's the general structure around incidents. The municipality or Jasper National Park could activate either half of this for an incident that was affecting our respective jurisdictions. Obviously, there is, we saw a situation where there was an incident that was very large and, you know, was ended up having implications for both of our jurisdictions at the same time. And this is where we start to transition into unified command. Essentially, we take those two incident management teams, those two IMTs that previously existed, and we bring them together into what's called unified command and the unified incident management team. In that case, each party still has their incident commander. One, John, we heard from John, who is acting as incident commander for the park. And we've all seen Christine acting as incident commander for the municipality. They are jointly making decisions and directing the operation of the incident management team when we are in unified command. And so then it is that combined effort of all of the resources from both parties that action the incident. The one thing that this doesn't represent, and again, it's really down to the rudimentary nature, but that unified command and incident management team, either as the combined structure or independently, we have the ability to draw on additional resources from a number of other places to augment our response. In the case of the municipality, we can draw on other partner municipalities. We're a party to an agreement with Northwest municipalities where we can draw on their resources. Council members and the public may have heard some references to Canada Task Force 2, who are a group of trained professionals from other Alberta organizations that come in to support municipalities or entities doing incident management teams and emergencies. So we can draw on those resources to supplement what we have. Parks Canada, obviously, as you heard, draws resources from across Canada, from provinces, from the National Parks Network. In our incident here, you may have seen that we have we have RCMP and other parties involved, as well as agencies like the Canadian military. So all of those resources can also be shown on a diagram like this, being drawn into that incident management team. But they are all, the work of all of them is directed by the unified incident commanders, jointly making decisions and setting the objectives for the incident response. Maybe I'll just pause there first, Mayor Ireland. There's another section I'd like to move on to about the transition between what the incident management team is taking care of and what the, how we transition into reentry and ultimately recovery. But I'll pause here just to see if there are any questions about that governance structure.
Thank you for that, CEO, given I will look for hands. I see nothing on the screen at the moment. Councillor Demoda.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very grateful, and I really like the proactive approach of having that here today. And I just hope that people, that are watching this and do have friends or fellow residents that aren't able to watch it today, just to forward that, the link later on so that they can watch it, because I think some of this information is really important to understand the processes behind the scenes, as well as I do have some questions, but I think some of them will get answered in the next few steps that Mr. Given's going to give us. So I'm just very grateful at having that already for us and for the community to observe. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And we can certainly come back to questions that relate back to that earlier presentation at any time, but please proceed with the balance of your presentation, Mr. Given.
Sure. Thanks very much, Your Worship. So the next is really around, when there is an incident and we know the structure that responds to the incident, what happens over time as the incident changes? And on our website, residents and the public can see this chart, which really demonstrates how, based on experience from other municipalities, input from provincial and federal agencies, this is the recognized spectrum of how an incident changes over time. And you can see on the left-hand side, measured in a very short time scale, there's the incident itself, which requires a high level of resources. And then the incident, you can see, doesn't end all at once. Just like our fire doesn't end all at once, and the effects from the fire don't end all at once. It will continue over time. There's the reentry phase, which there was a lead up to the point of reentry, which is now targeted for Friday. That is still within the incident. And then there's ultimately recovery and rebuild, which are the activities that happen under a longer time scale measured in months and years. So each of these 4 phases really have different parties responsible. The incident and reentry phases are guided by the incident management team and through our unified command structure. So the incident and the response to the wildfire and the activities related to restoration of services within the town site are really a part of the incident, and the reentry planning is a part of the incident as well. So those things are being handled. This red box, the first 2 steps, are being handled by the incident management team and the unified command structure that I referenced in the first part of the presentation. These longer term pieces of recovery and rebuild are things that are essentially into business continuity or the operation of the municipality generally. So we have some recommendations later on in the report about the resources that will be required to support recovery and rebuilding over time. We can have some discussion of that, but if, for the public and for council, understanding who's in charge when, the first 2 steps of incident and reentry are fully under the direction of the incident command and the incident management team through that unified command structure. Recovery and rebuild are things that will really fall to the municipal council and the community. And again, that work will be measured in months and years. But I think it's important for the public to get a bit of a sense of how these areas are different and also how they overlap. You'll observe in the chart that there is actually this area where, just above the S in weeks, where all of the things are happening. Reentry is happening, the incident continues to happen, recovery work has started, rebuild work has started. And so we are absolutely entering this time where there's a high degree of complexity because a number of different parties are working on a number of different timescales. And each one of the activities is important, but they do have different entities resourcing them. And you can appreciate for the municipality to be reorienting our operations to support recovery and rebuild. There's a ramping up that needs to happen. And you'll see some recommendations on our agenda today related to initiating that ramping up. Over time, the incident management team and unified command will scale down or ramp down to a point where, eventually that team will wrap up its activity. And it will be fully on to the municipality to continue on. And I should say the municipality, the park, and community partners. But I just wanted to share that. That's my last slide. I'll stop there. But just wanted to highlight who's responsible for what during which phases of, from incident ultimately to rebuilding. I'm happy to take any questions from there, Mayor Ireland and Council.
Thank you, CAO Given, for that. Any questions from councillors with respect to that explanation of the structure and the decision-making process? All right, I see no hands, including, oh, there I see Councillor Waxer, go ahead.
Yes, I just wondered whether we might take the opportunity to share that kind of information on our website, because I think that may not be something that all residents would understand, and it may be helpful in terms of understanding what is happening, what's happened in the past, and what's going to happen in the future.
Your worship, for Councillor Waxer. So certainly that graphic is up on our website now. We have started to launch resources related to rebuilding. So this actually is a good segue to give a plug to the section on our website for the Jasper Wildfire 2024. We have information there around general questions and answers. We've already published a reentry guide to be able to support residents in getting back into the community. We have updates on our reentry progress, but we're also starting the information related to recovery efforts, specifically focusing for right now on our housing survey. But the chart that I shared is specifically posted on our reentry progress page, so people can see that there. We'll see what we can do to provide a little bit more about of the commentary that I shared. You will see the resources on our web page changing much more frequently than they may have in the past, as the incident progresses and we move through those different states along that spectrum. We'll be dropping information that's no longer relevant and highlighting the information that's most relevant and useful to residents and the community as we go forward. So I would encourage people to continue to look to our website for the latest information, and we'll see what we can do to provide a little bit more context about governance and how it works.
If there are not other questions on that, I would just add some brief information to contextualize this structure in terms of the ongoing incident. So on behalf of the Emergency Advisory Committee of Council, it was on their advice that the state of local emergency was declared. That is one of the roles of the Emergency Advisory Committee, and that was done by those committee members at about 8:30 on, I think it was July 22nd, but I've forgotten the dates necessarily, but evening time, 8:30, I think roughly. And after that, of course, that's when things transition from council or committee decision-making to incident command. And so the evacuation order was issued after the state of local emergency had been declared. So that was an initiative of unified command. Since then, on behalf of the Emergency Advisory Committee, I have signed 3 extensions of the state of local emergency so that it continues, and the powers that come with that under Section 19 continue to exist. The Emergency Advisory Committee also gave advice with respect to setting the terms of reentry. So those broad 6 goals were matters discussed at a meeting of the Emergency Advisory Committee. That advice was then passed to Unified Command. They completed some of the subsets of those 6 broad goals and make the determination as to when those conditions have been satisfied sufficient to let residents re-enter. And that continues to be the case now, that we are still under a declaration of a state of local emergency, and any lifting of the evacuation order is still in the hands of the unified commanders under incident command. So just to give a partial explanation of where we are and where council is in respect to the ongoing management of the incident. If there are no other questions with respect to agenda item 3.1, I would invite us to. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Demota, go ahead.
That's fine. I realize, we have to get moving on. I have some tough questions, and they have to do with one of them has to do with the elephant in the park. I don't want to say in the room, just because of the most frequently asked questions is, with all the decision-making process in place, there are people that would like to know a little bit more information on how Unified Command came to the decision or conclusion that visitors are okay to be welcome to the park. But I'm sorry if that was addressed. My internet kind of cut out there for the time being, and I guess the other question too is has the park itself, as Parks Canada, still, or has it have they declared a state of local emergency for the park, the greater area? I guess it's twofold. So however that gets directed, who can answer those questions?
Your worship, I can probably speak to some of those. I'm here in the incident command post. I'm obviously not directing the work. That's the incident commanders, but I'm party to some of the discussions, so I can provide a little bit of insight. First, there's an entire a re-entry team that's been built and has been working over the last while. I think residents have heard about the amount of planning work that has gone into getting us to the stage where we can feel confident that there's strategies and plans for all the different types of things that people are going to run up against as we get to reentry. As a part of that planning, they look to past practice in other municipalities, what worked, what didn't, and they're building recommendations based on sort of best evidence and experience from other places. And that really, the nature of the discussion was that differential reentry, allowing different types of people to enter at different times becomes really challenging and becomes a complex task in and of itself. So the focus was on ensuring that there was a return to the community as soon as possible for as many people as possible, because we certainly heard from a number of different types of businesses that they needed to get in and assess their properties to be able to resume. We heard from residents a really strong desire to get home as soon as possible. And so I think the team was focused on trying to ensure that they did that in a safe manner as quickly as possible. And the evidence from other jurisdictions said the way to do that is to not go with the complication of some sort of differential reentry. I'll say that certainly the incident management team is constantly revising its approach on all incidents. And I mean, and I'm going to separate a little bit from the reentry for a moment, but you can appreciate that fire behavior can change day to day. And so what seems like an appropriate, tactical plan on one day may need to be adjusted the next day. That's what these teams are set up to do, to adjust their plans according to, the situation on the ground. And so I'll say that my understanding is that the incident management team is applying that same line of thinking to reentry. They've heard that there's a need for an adjustment, and I believe that they're working through that process. It's certainly not my place to, make any announcements on their behalf. But I think the message from the public has been received, and the incident management team is now assessing the conditions on the ground and trying to decide how they might revise their approach. Certainly would leave it to, to others that are in that structure to be able to share specifics. But I think it's fair to say that they are hearing, listening, and assessing how they may need to change plans, and they're flexible enough to be able to do that.
All right. I just wanted to say that I do respect the decision. I think the question is obviously because there are people that know how to do this way beyond my comprehension and our comprehension. So I'm grateful. Again, it's got to be those have to be tough calls to make. And so I do respect where we're at. And I'm glad that people are continually reassessing it. And thank you for answering that. I mean, it's tough to do that. And I guess just on the last part, the state of local emergency, does that apply to the park, or do we just as a municipality are able to do that? And I guess the necessity for having that, and is there a tandem thing that happens?
Sorry, Councillor Mo, I forgot about that part of the question. So the municipality's ability to declare a state of local emergency only applies to the town site. And so outside the town site, I think the structure that is used is essentially area closures, and that's at the direction of the superintendent. So, Jasperites will be very familiar with that. We see area closures from time to time during the regular course of business for a variety of reasons. And the superintendent has that ultimate authority to force area closures. There may be some other intricacies with their ability to declare a state of local emergency, but I think for all practical purposes, the easiest way for all of us to think about it is that the superintendent can choose to close any area or all of the park should they choose to. And that's the authority that closures would happen under.
Okay, I appreciate that. And, I just, for a little bit of clarity, there are some of us that put ourselves out on social media a little bit more than others. And so when you do that, you get a few more questions asked. So I don't mind, receiving those and addressing them. with you and council. I guess one of the messages I wanted to get out there, because the other frequently asked questions I get revolve around personal insurance and commercial insurance. And my only recommendation is try to keep in contact as much as possible with your adjusters, because every insurance company has different wording. They have different coverage and different terminology. And so personally, when we were speaking with our adjuster, they said that, you know, some coverage is only within the time of the evacuation. So when the evacuation is called back, then you know, that's when this type of coverage ends. So I would recommend that everybody get some details on what that means, because state of a local emergency and our community being in an evacuation, even though that has changed a little bit, we're still in evacuation notification. I would recommend that, and sorry if that's not the right term, if you can clarify what the exact status is right now, that would be great. But I just, again, I recommend as much as possible to get some clarity on if that means state of local emergency or in, you know, what type of evacuation status that you're covered in. And I can't emphasize that more. Thank you.
I'm not sure whether Mr. Given intended to respond, but apart from, I see a shake of the head, apart from what I think is good advice, direct residents to their own insurance providers or their agent or broker. One of the things you might also do is provide a link to the really helpful telephone town halls that have been posted or hosted by the province. At each of those, similar questions are asked by numerous residents. The representative from the Insurance Bureau of Canada is there, who provides really helpful messages to residents who are forced to confront those issues. And so if you can find that link and share it on your social media channels, it's another really good resource, as are those telephone town halls generally. So another thing that you can easily share is just a link. I think all of those have been recorded, and so the questions and the answers are part of a public record, and they're accessible to anybody who happened to miss those telephone town halls.
Okay, and our evacuation status has changed slightly.
Your worship, so the evacuation status at this time hasn't changed, right? Re-entry is, you know, not until Friday. On Friday, there'd be a change in that. That would not be a change in the state of local emergency. As Mayor Ireland referenced, you know, there may be other authorities that we require under a state of local emergency. So sort of special powers that are created by a state of local emergency, particularly, you know, with respect to pricing. In other jurisdictions, we've seen challenges around price inflation or concerns around price gouging. The state of local emergency would allow the municipality to exercise some power, the incident management team to exercise some powers if required around price fixing. And, you know, particularly around rents or, you know, other sort of necessities of life. The state of local emergency also provides the team the authority to restrict access to private property, which obviously with the damaged and destroyed properties, the safety of the public and safety of those leaseholders is going to be very important. And the state of local emergency is something that does that. So there are many different reasons why the state of local emergency is likely to continue for some time, even if it isn't as a result of the wildfire threat. I think the loss of approximately 800 housing units within the town site, it would be reason enough to have a state of local emergency in and of itself, never mind the disastrous effects on municipal infrastructure and the lack of potable water and all those other things that I think people are well aware of. There's going to likely continue to be a state of local emergency for some time, even if it isn't for the purpose of evacuation.
Councillor Melnick.
Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you, Mr. Gibbon. With the discussion about state of local emergency and the evacuation order, I think the commentary regarding referring back to your insurance provider is important. And I think within that context, I wonder if we could just highlight when we would lift the evacuation order, we would still be under an evacuation alert, meaning that residents need to be prepared to be ready to leave again should things change and we need to go back to an evacuation order. I just want to make sure that that's part of the understanding that residents have as we re-enter the town site.
Thank you for that, Councillor Melnick. I certainly understand it exactly the same way, and so that is an issue for messaging, and I think probably part of the re-entry guide, which is a really helpful document and another great place to refer residents when they have questions. It continues to evolve and adjust, but it's online already with lots of Q&As attached. So another really good source, or resource, I should say. But thank you, Councillor Melnick. That is right, that even though re-entry may come on Friday, the town will still be under an evacuation alert, and any returning residents should be cognizant of that and act accordingly with respect to being prepared to leave again. If we might, I would invite us to move to agenda item 3.2. I will say that I am in a situation where I have to be out of this room with my internet connection at 11 o'clock. And so Councillor Keller-Hrenpe, you might have to continue the meeting wherever we get to, but I'll stay as late as I can. But if we could move to agenda item 3.2 now, we could make some progress.
Sure. Thanks very much, Your Worship. Some of these may be faster than others, but so as council knows, you were all just on your regularly scheduled council break that is built into our annual council schedule. The municipality publishes a regular schedule of meetings. We do that once a year in October of every year, and essentially council approves scheduled meetings for the course of the entire year. This summer, the schedule break was when the evacuation happened. This meeting now is the first regularly scheduled meeting that is on our calendar. And the report that's in front of you under item 3.2 is essentially a recommendation that council adjust that previously approved calendar by, one, canceling all committee of the whole meetings that were currently scheduled for the months of August, September, and October, and instead hold regular council meetings at the same dates and times. And two, the council changed the start times of its regular meetings from 1:30 p.m. to 9:30 a.m. And so essentially this recommendation is to ensure that there's a more frequent pace of council being assembled as council rather than committee of the whole, because it is actually council that can authorize decisions. Our committee of the whole structure typically means that there's a lag time between when committee sees something and then recommends it to council, and then ultimately council approving. In the current situation where things will be moving rapidly and we'll need decisions made by council faster, the change from committee of the whole, elimination of committee of the whole, and moving to regular council meetings each week will enable faster decision making as required. It'll also ensure that council is regularly updated and will provide consistency between meeting times. So rather than having 1 week starting in the afternoon and 1 week starting in the morning, council and the public and administration can know that council will meet every Tuesday at 9:30 a.m. For the course of August, September, and October. And in October, council would set a calendar of meetings for the upcoming year and into 2025. So this is to bridge that gap, to speed council decision-making and opportunity to hear about the event, by changing things to regular council for the balance of this previously approved calendar. Your worship, that's all I have to present, and we just need a council motion to formalize that.
Thank you for that, Mr. Given. Subject to any questions that councillors may have for Mr. Given, is there a councillor prepared to make the motion as recommended? Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, I would make the motion that council cancel all committee of the whole meetings currently scheduled during the months of August, September, and October 2024, and hold regular council meetings at the same dates and times as a canceled committee of the whole meeting would otherwise be held. Further, I would make, in addition, I would make the motion that council change the start time of the regular meetings from 1:30 to 9:30 on the first and third Tuesdays of the month until the end of October 2024.
Thank you for that motion, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Melding, I saw your hand up to make that motion as well, and I acknowledge that. I think it will be unanimous, but only one gets to make the motion. Is there any debate? Seeing no hands, I'll call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you very much for that. Agenda item 3.3, financial relief recommendations. I believe Director Melanchuk is available. If you want to introduce that first, Mr. Given, go ahead.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. I will. Director Melanchuk's here for any technical questions. And apologies to council for the late delivery of this. As you can imagine, our team is pulled in a number of different directions, but we wanted to be able to provide advice to council on some immediate financial steps that we can take to ease the burden on Jasper businesses and residents. Obviously, everybody well understands the impact of the wildfire and the destruction of property. And the municipality wants to ensure that we're not increasing the burden on residents and businesses at a very difficult time. So we were able to develop a suite of recommendations, again, based on experience from other places and what we see on the ground here in Jasper. And maybe I'll just go through the recommendations again, because there's a number of them. And the overall intent is to ease the burden on residents. We will have a number of discussions about what the future looks like, but these are steps that administration identified we could take immediately. The first recommendation is that council authorize the immediate suspension of pre-authorized tax payments on all damaged or destroyed properties. We appreciate that all the residents that sign up to make monthly tax installment payments. That's a great system, and we appreciate that some of those people have lost their properties, and so administration has actually already acted to stop withdrawals. So residents may have seen that. We made that administrative decision. But we would like council to fully authorize that, and that's that first recommendation. The second recommendation is that council direct administration to defer collection of property taxes outlined under the bylaw beginning as of July 22nd. The defer until when would be a decision that we would a recommendation that we would come forward, but just to give the public some confidence again for those properties that remain, that of the things they're thinking about right now. The collection of property taxes is something that can be put off to be thought about a little bit down the road. The third is that council authorize that any penalties on outstanding property tax amounts not be applied for July 2024. Again, that's ensuring that if there's something outstanding, that it's not increasing the burden over the next little while. And again, there will be more decisions that will need to be made, but this is that immediate suspension. Fourth, that council direct administration to return with a report outlining the options and costs associated with refunding property taxes for the period of July, following July 22nd on damaged or destroyed properties. So while some people may have signed up for monthly payments and may have only made some of the monthly payments for the portion of the year, other people may have paid all of their taxes at once on the tax payment deadline. Administration would like to examine what the implications and costs would be associated with refunding that, because obviously that there's more complexity there. But we would like to confirm that council is supportive of at least examining that issue, so we can see if there's a ability to return some funds to residents if they'd sort of prepaid their property taxes for the balance of the year. Fifth, that council authorize the immediate suspension and waiver of all water, sewer, solid waste, and recycling charges on damaged or destroyed properties as of July 22nd. So similar to the tax payments, essentially saying we appreciate that the property has been destroyed. And as of that date, there is no, we don't expect any of those utility fees to be being paid on damaged or destroyed property. 6, that penalties on outstanding amounts under the utility bylaw from May and June be waived for all properties. So this is, being applied broadly across the municipality. With our 2-month billing cycle, going into July, residents may have been thinking about, making their payments for May and June, but obviously with the evacuation and everything that's been going on, it wouldn't be a surprise if somebody missed a payment. We want to ensure that there aren't any additional penalties incurred by residents whose minds have been elsewhere. This is specific to that May-June billing. We can have some more discussions down the road about other billings and what strategy we might like to take. But again, we saw that this was an opportunity for immediate action. And then finally, that council direct administration return with a report recommending options or strategies to mitigate the municipality's loss of utility and property tax revenue. Obviously, many of these immediate measures and some of the other measures going forward will mean a loss of revenue for the municipality. As we go into reentry, recovery, and rebuilding, the municipality is actually going to have additional expenses. There are provincial and federal programs available for that we are applying to for those additional expenses. But we will need to do some more work to identify how the municipality will fill the gap in our revenue from the amount of properties that were destroyed. An initial preliminary evaluation identifies that we lost about $283 million in property values. And those property values equate to just over $2.2 million in municipal property taxes, Alberta School Board property taxes, and evergreen requisitions. So we're going to need to figure out exactly, in collaboration likely with those partners, the province of Alberta, Evergreens Foundation, how we manage that loss of property tax revenue going forward over the next number of years, because obviously that will be a reduction in our capacity just when we need it the most. So we're going to need to work with those other parties to figure out how we mitigate that. Your worship, I won't belabor the point. These were all actions that administration identified that we could take immediately. There will need to be significantly more discussion going forward around the financial impacts on the municipalities and organization and steps that we can take to support residents and businesses. But we felt that these were ones that we could bring forward to you in the immediate term in your first meeting back after the event.
Thank you very much, Mr. Given, and that in fact is exactly the purpose of the special meeting, so that we can take some immediate action to bring some relief to residents. Just commenting for myself, and I saw your hand, Councillor Wilson, I'll be right with you. I support all of the measures recommended, but I will say over time, I would expect that we would have to refine the definition of damaged. We know for sure the homes that were destroyed, the extent of damage will vary, and that will be something where down the road I think we will need to be able to add some clarity. But otherwise, I thank you for the presentation. I thank the work of Director Malinchuk to consider all of these different combinations of factors that will affect our residents differently, and try to devise an approach that will benefit the most and the greatest. So thank you for that. Councillor Wilson, go ahead.
Well, yeah, you stole my thunder. It was just definitely thanking administration for quick action on some type of deferral of payment, and I definitely support all of these items. And again, the definition of damaged, I think we definitely have to build out. In my mind, I think if a property is habitable, it may not fall within the parameters of damaged. There may be some exterior type of work that may or may not inhibit somebody from inhabiting the property. So, but yes, if we can build that out a bit more, that would be great. Thanks.
Deputy Mayor Kelleher-MP.
Thank you, Mayor Arden. Thank you, Mr. Given and Ms. Smelnchuk. This is great. And I do look forward to you coming back on how we can compensate the people that have paid their full taxes but lost their homes. I think it's very important that they also get some relief. So I look forward to that coming back.
Councillor Demota?
I just wanted to ask that before we leave this conversation and go on to the next topic, I do have some questions on planning outside of this particularly, but it does have some direct relation, but not really important for debate or discussion right now.
Well, we are constituted as a special meeting for the purpose of making some decisions. And so I appreciate there might be more discussion, but it would be nice if there are further questions about the recommendations that have just been presented. I invite those, but otherwise, if there is a motion prepared, I don't think it's in our package, but Mr. Given or Ms. Melanchuk might be able to confirm a motion that would capture, was it 6 or 7 items of relief that could be authorized by council now, so that we have accomplished a significant goal here this morning, if we could do that.
Yeah, your worship, the items that I was referencing were all emailed out in an RFD to council this morning. So again, apologies for that late, sending. We're still working on assembling these in advance of the council meeting. We will ensure that the public has this as a matter of the record, but council members should have that in their inbox. And I think unless council members wanted to discuss or debate any of the measures individually, a motion to authorize the financial measures as recommended could be a lot simpler than having to repeat all 6 or 7 of the individual measures.
Thank you for that. Clarity, Mr. Given, is there a councillor prepared to make that motion that we authorize acceptance of the recommended measures? Councillor Waxer, that is your motion?
Yes, it is.
Thank you very much. Does anybody wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Demota, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize that the portion that was emailed to us today will be attached to the minutes subsequent to this meeting for the next regular meeting.
Thank you. I think that will be the case. Councillor Wilson, I've lost you now. I did see your hand, but I think you were just trying to make the same motion that Kathleen made.
Yeah, that's correct. I'm ready to vote.
Okay. Councillor Melnick.
I just wanted to say I was going to speak in favor of the motion, and also that we make it as one motion as opposed to separating into 7 different motions.
That is where we are at, so thank you for that. If there is another councillor who wishes to speak to the motion, I would ask for that now. Otherwise, I see no hands. I will call the questions. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you very much. I have to switch between devices. That takes us to agenda item.
If I may, Your Worship.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Councillor Demota.
Yeah, no, I just because it's one of those questions that was kind of bordering on re-entry and this one specifically to properties and stuff. We did hear that the Premier had made some commitments to temporary housing, and another large question that's been asked, what kind of plans are in place for people who have lost dwellings, and when do we expect to hear about something like that? I know this is kind of out of the real scope of the design of this meeting, but just for that construct, there are people that are that needing that information, or at least having some assurances that there are things taking place, and I guess I'm just asking when we can expect to hear a little bit more of that planning. sorry, through use, your worship, to CAO Given.
Mr. Given has a wry smile on his face, but his microphone is muted.
Oh, no, Your Worship, I was just waiting there to see how you're going to refer the question. So for Councillor Demota, absolutely, that work has already been undertaken. Council may be aware of the existence of the tripartite municipal, provincial, federal housing task force that's underway. We're looking at exactly these types of questions, really focusing on, that sort of midterm, longer term housing. And so that work is already underway, as I referenced, in that spectrum, a number of overlapping activities that really relate to one another. I don't have announcements about housing to make today, but other than to assure residents that that work is happening. I think, as Councillor Demota, as you said yourself, people's first conversation should be with their insurance. Many, people that were leaseholders with homes may have coverage for living out allowances while you're not able to occupy your home, or if the property was destroyed. But so that would be the first stop, is to ensure that that you have that conversation with your insurance. The other thing that I think is important for the public to know, and this was referenced in the town hall last night, is that the recovery centers are currently scheduled to continue operating to the 24th, so that people that are accessing those supports and housing through those supports can have, for right now, what we can tell them is that that will continue until the 24th. Obviously, these things will continue to be reassessed, but my overall message would be that, one, you should speak to your insurance about what coverage your coverage will provide in terms of being, living expenses when you can't occupy your property. Two, that the municipality, the province, and the federal government through Parks Canada are all collaborating on the issue of longer term housing to allow people to return to the community and rebuild. And three, that the folks that are accessing housing through the reception centers will be able to continue to access that support until at least the 24th of August. So those are the things that I can speak to with certainty right now.
And if I might just augment that response from Mr. Given, that tripartite group that is working on the establishment of temporary housing needs information. There is currently a resident needs survey out. It is critical that we continue to get the message out to residents that we need to hear from them, so that that group can configure the type and the amount of housing that we need. And so whether you are in need of housing, or whether you might have housing that could be available to other residents, it is critical information in the hands of that working group, so that they can configure the appropriate response. So again, make sure, if you're dealing with residents at all, encourage them to fill out that survey. And again, as Mr. Given indicated, have them get the link to the telephone town halls, because much of this has been discussed, and I hope that residents will find it at least somewhat reassuring to understand that the work is in progress, but the information to make the work effective needs to be collected. So let people know that that survey is critical. I will take it then that perhaps I can move now to agenda item 3.4, recovery office structure and committee terms of reference. Again, Mr. Given.
Yes, Your Worship. I'll keep this at a very high level, recognizing the time. Similar to the last motion around financial supports, administration's been looking at what we need now and how we can act to be able to better support our community. The first recommendation is that Council direct administration develop a governance and organizational structure for a recovery office and a terms of reference for a recovery committee, and return to a future council meeting with those documents for council discussion and debate. And then second, that council approve the establishment of a director of recovery position within the municipality, reporting to the CAO. As we go into those next phases, this is going to be work that is in addition and on top of any pre-existing work We need to have these resources in place immediately. As a reference, that recovery work is already starting, and there are a number of steps related to rebuilding that we need to have dedicated resources. This has been regular practice in other communities that have suffered similar situations as Jasper. And so having a dedicated position will ensure that we have a centralized resource that is focusing strictly on recovery. Around the governance and organizational structures, obviously, that's going to take some thought. Being in the national park and our unique arrangement with Parks Canada, there is going to need to be an ongoing level of collaboration as we move into the recovery phases. And so we want to be able to sketch out what that might look like for council. We would collaborate with Parks on that. A thing that will certainly be a part of that process would be a recovery committee. In other communities, this may be a subcommittee of council, but quite often it will also involve other stakeholders, non-governmental organizations, business or industry representation, and other parties to provide advice on the recovery efforts. So a little bit like in our incident management team structure, there's the emergency advisory committee, which provides advice to the operation. I think and again, this is early stage thinking, but I think it would be possible to think about this recovery committee as fulfilling the same function about advising administration that's working on recovery about factors to consider, things that would be important, and acting as that sounding board. So again, not necessarily directing the efforts in the same way that council directs municipal operations, but really setting that strategic advice, being a sounding board, and helping the organization and recovery plans and teams focus on the things that are important. So again, we're not asking you to approve a terms of reference today. We're asking to confirm that council wants us to draft that terms of reference and come back to a future meeting. But we are asking you to approve the establishment of that new position so that we can immediately hire. And I can advise council that have been doing some work. I think I've identified an appropriate candidate who's available. And we would like to have them here as soon as possible so they can start to be a party to all the conversations that are happening and start help supplement the municipality's efforts towards recovery as soon as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Are there questions with respect to the recommendation before us? All right, I see none. Mr. Given, just for clarity, the cost of the new position you are satisfied will be covered through disaster relief program.
Your worship, yes. We've already put in a preliminary application to the disaster recovery program and included this position as well as some of the others that we expect that we'll need in that preliminary application. Obviously, there's more steps to do to formalize those positions, but we saw this one as the priority. And yes, we expect it to be recovered through the disaster relief program from the province.
Thank you for that. In the absence of questions, is there a councillor prepared to make a motion based on the recommendation? Councillor Melnick?
Thank you, Your Worship. I do make the motion that council direct administration to develop draft governance and organizational structures for a recovery office and a terms of reference for a recovery committee and return to a future committee meeting, and that council approve the establishment of a director of recovery position reporting to the CAO.
Might I just ask Councillor Melnick that we change the word not to a future committee meeting because we've canceled those, but to a future council meeting?
So noted, and I agree, yes.
Thank you for that. Any debate on the motion? Councillor Hall?
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. Can everyone hear me okay?
I think so.
Okay.
I can.
I think that staffing needs are going to be immense in the next few years and probably complicated by the fact that some staff will have lost their homes, might not return. Residents are going to need all the support they can get. This will be a really steep learning curve for both the municipality and residents. And I feel that we need all the extra support possible. And I appreciate the swift response from administration in bringing this request to decision for council, and I support the recommendation.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hall. Councillor Wilson, did I see your hand? I did.
Yeah, sorry, I did get pulled away during before the motion was up. I do have a question for administration about the position. It doesn't state that it's a term position. Do you see it as a term position? 3 to 5 year term. I can't see us needing that position, 5 to 10 years down the line. So is it prudent to put parameters around it at this point?
Your worship, for Councillor Wilson, yes, so that not stated in the motion, but the intention that we've moved forward with to start, and with any positions related to recovery, it would be that they would be term positions. We've discussed with the province that typical is either a 1 to 3 year term to start, with the potential of extending if necessary, and I think that that's happened in other places. So for this position, we've started it at a 2 year term. It would be the intention. We've explicitly noted that there'd be the opportunity to extend if necessary. But we would not see them as regular parts of the municipal operation going forward. Again, I think if we remember that chart of the resource needs, they sort of trend up, and then you respond and do work, and then over time, resource needs would trail down. I think that what that trailing down and tapering off would look like is what we'll learn over the course of the next 3 to 5 years.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for that question, Councillor Wilson, and Mr. Given for that response. The motion has been made. If there are no other councillors who wish to speak to the motion, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. We have one agenda item left. I have 2 minutes before I have to give up this room to the incident command team for an interview with somebody, not with me. So, Mr. Given, if you can move quickly through agenda item 3.5, we can wrap adjourn by 11.
Your worship, absolutely I will. And I'll just say that our energy environment manager is here. Mona, I'm not going to give you an opportunity to speak, and this really underdoes the amount of effort that Mona put into the report, which is quite comprehensive. This really is business continuity, speaking to some work that we had underway prior to the event. Council had given administration direction to refer the matter of joining the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy to a committee meeting following the 2024 budget discussions. We're now here to recommend essentially that we not join the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, because we have other ways that essentially get at the same goal. The municipality had been a member of the Partners for Climate Protection. Administration recommends that we renew our membership in that organization. And council knows that Tourism Jasper had, previous to the event, been working to undertake some initiatives to obtain Green Step Sustainable Tourism Destination certification for Jasper. Council gave administration direction to participate with Tourism Jasper on that. Mona's analysis has identified, and again, you can see the attachments, that though there's a lot of overlapping work, and the benefits of joining the Global Covenant really don't outweigh the additional work that would be required, particularly when we're already investing in climate action under those other 2 strategies. So I can stop there, Your Worship.
Thank you for that, Mr. Given, and thank you, Mona. I was very impressed by the in-depth research and the report that came back to me, and I am certainly prepared to accept the recommendation. I thought there might be greater value in the Global Covenant of Mayors, but we are still continuing to focus on climate change and adaptation, resilience. But if we can do that in ways that are less encumbering to staff and less consumption of staff time, then I certainly appreciate that recommendation. Any questions for Mr. Given? Is there a councillor prepared to make the motion then? Councillor Wilson? Thank you.
Yeah, I would make the motion that council receive the report for information, recommend administration renew Partners for Climate Protection membership support Tourism Jasper with their initiative to obtain a Green Step Sustainable Tourism Destination certification, and take no further action to join the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy at this time.
Thank you for that motion, Councillor Wilson. Does anyone wish to speak to the motion? Seeing nods or shakes of heads, I should say, I will call the question. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. That concludes our agenda. I will call for a motion to adjourn, although there is nothing left. There is nothing left for us to do. Deputy Mayor Kelleher-Empey has made a motion that we adjourn at 11:02 a.m. All those in favor? There are none opposed. Thank you all. We are adjourned.
Same time, same channel next week.
The hook is at the door. I have to go. Thank you.